Welcome to Human Impacts Houston, and to give you a little bit of background, my name is Tara DePort, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Human Impacts Institute, and we're actually based all the way in New York City, so we're really excited to be here in Houston today. And this is the last of our first US tour in collaboration with the Transatlantic Climate Bridge of Germany to re-communicate climate change. And really, one of our goals is how can we make it more personal? How can we really connect it to the things that matter to our diverse communities across the US, so that hopefully we can work more together across political lines, across religious beliefs, across, you name it, to actually take action on the issues that are affecting our communities. So we're super excited to end here the year in Houston, and excited to get started. But first, I have one of the things, our salons are a little bit different, so I hope you'll come out with a different experience. We'll have performance, we have videos. Some will make you laugh, some might make you angry, some might make you cry. There's one that gets me every time, so we'll see. And I'm really hoping we can work together to break down also some of the stereotypes we might all have around this issue of climate change. So I'm excited to start with the first one. It was my first question for you. What does an environmentalist look like?
Flannel shirts.
Flannel shirts? What else? What type of shoes do they wear?
Birkenstocks.
What do you think? Yeah? I have, without a doubt, when I ask anywhere in the world I've been, I ask what type of shoes, and everyone knows what a Birkenstock is somehow. I don't know. So, as an environmentalist here, I am not wearing Birkenstocks. So, but I also want to think of some other not typical environmentalists. So this is a little quiz for you guys. Someone said, if we've learned any lessons during the past few decades, perhaps the most important is that preservation of our environment is not a partisan challenge, it's common sense. Our physical health, our social happiness, and our economic well-being will be sustained only by all of us working in partnership as thoughtful, effective stewards of our natural resources. Whew. Who said that?
Ronald Reagan.
Look at you. Yeah. Yeah. Ronald Reagan. So another one. Climate change is a terrible problem and it absolutely needs to be solved. It deserves to be a huge priority. What do you think? Another person that you might not think is top on your list. I'm going to say tons of money. Tons of money. Think money. US. Person.
Gates.
Computers.
Bill Gates.
There you go. Bill Gates, not necessarily your typical environmentalist. The most important thing about global warming is this: whether humans are responsible for the bulk of climate change is going to be left to the scientists, but it's all of our responsibility to leave this planet in better shape for the future generations than we found it. Again, I don't know if he owns Birkenstocks, but Mike Huckabee. So, former Republican governor of Arkansas, Southern Baptist minister, and Fox News host. So I wanted to start out with this as a way, because we're hopefully going to challenge a lot of stereotypes we have and a lot of things that, how can we bring our communities together on this issue? And I've got one more that I think is an important one. Climate change is about Katrina, Rita, and Ike devastating communities in Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida, and Texas. Climate change is about people in Detroit, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and elsewhere who have died and are dying of exposure to toxins from coal-fired power plants. It's about the fact that race over class is the #1 indicator for the placement of toxic facilities in this country. Climate change is about the fact that in our communities it is far easier to find a bag of Cheetos than a carton of strawberries. What do you guys think? It is not Dr. Bullard, but I bet he'd agree with some of that. It is actually from the NAACP. All right? So, I would love now to invite our fabulous panel that we have today up here. And we do, just so that you guys know, we have two mics for you that you just have to turn on. First of all, there's me over there. And I'd like to invite Dr. Robert Goulart, who is the Dean of the Barbara Jordan Mickey Leland School of Public Affairs at Texas Southern University. Come on down. Thank you, sir. And I would next, I'm gonna try, I know it's phonetic, oops, I just went backwards. Marita Mirzatuni, who's project manager for Environmental Defense Fund's U.S. Climate and Energy Program. Come on down. And we have Dr. Georg Mauer, who's first Secretary of Climate and Energy of the German Embassy in D.C. Come on down. And Deborah Deep Mouton, along with her wonderful daughter, Aldi, who is our youngest audience member tonight, who is a resident writer of the Writers in Schools here in Houston, among many other things. And last, but certainly not least, is Dr. Dominic Boyer, who is professor and director at the Center of Energy and Environmental Research in Human Sciences at Rice University. Welcome. So, as promised, unfortunately, one of our performers for tonight was actually one of our speakers and one of our performers fell ill. So, I wanted to start off with, we like to start off with a little inspiration, because I hope all of us have come here tonight to dig a little deeper than we usually do. And we decided to show a film that was actually from one of our panelists in Miami, who this performance was at the G20 summit in Mexico City a couple of years ago. And if you're familiar with the G20 summit, there's a lot of talk about its leading countries around the world, often talking about economic issues and other political issues. So this performance happened there in that context. And I think it will trigger a lot of thoughts for you.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. I want you to get up right now. Get up, go to your windows, open them, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. Then we'll figure out what to do about the depression and the inflation and the oil crisis. First, get up out of your chairs, open the window, stick your head out and yell, and say, I'm as bad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
But overwhelmingly what we're seeing here are plastic particles. The ocean has become a plastic soup.
We replace the war threat with an environmental threat.
Sustainability means that things can keep going, can sustain themselves, can continue into the future and go on forever.
Global warming is a scam.
From here on in, you're on your own. Have fun, and good luck.
Way to start, I think, and probably different for many of you. So we're going to start a conversation that I think we can start. We could talk about just that video probably all night long amongst us, but I actually have one more just 30-second video to show you that I'm hoping will spark our first conversation. And this is actually from NASA's and its temperature data. Starting in 1880 to 2011, sped up. So if you'll see, because we're about to get planet Earth up there on a flat image, and you'll see as things get redder, that means temperatures, the actual data is getting warm, they're getting warmer. So you'll see what happens from 1880 to 2011. I'm going to quiz you on it, so you better watch. Seems to be getting a lot more red, yeah? So my first question for the panel here, and Dr. Boulard, or Boulard, I'm sorry. I would love to start with you, is how urgent is climate change?
Well, that's a very easy one for me. It's past urgent. It's an emergency, and I think it's too timely to debate because there's really no debate. And I think it's time for talk is long past due. It's time to act. And I think the longer we prolong action, the more in peril we'll be as a planet and as a human species and civilization. So for me, it's at the top of the agenda. Priority one, job one.
Yeah. And Dominic, I'd love to go to you. You just have to press the mute button, believe it or not, to turn it on. It'll go green. How urgent is climate?
Hello? Hello?
Did it go green?
Yes. How urgent is climate?
Yes. How urgent is it?
I would say, so I figure that, the Earth is absorbing about 40 million of this worth of energy this night. For the next decade. I think that's a pretty striking figure. I think, just as Dr. Boyd said, it's beyond urgent. The question is how one convinces people to act on that, especially when, of course, the signs of it can be ambiguous sometimes, right? You don't see climate change easily, except in these kinds of visualizations. So how do you get people to connect it to their lives and to incentivize people to act in decisive ways about it?
Great. And could you pass it to Dr. Mala next year? How urgent is it? Do you have anything else to add? And you do have to hold the mic very close to your mouth.
I'll leave it to our wonderful colleagues and to the science to explain that, but it's clear for us that it's very urgent and we already started acting, and that is what we concentrate on. So adapt to this changing climate, adapt with our way of life and with our way of using energy particularly.
So before I introduce the next question, so up here at least, it sounds like, now we didn't hear from Marita and Deborah, but that the time is to act is now. But before we get to our next question, I'd love to show this segment from about a year ago from a news segment.
It's a source of energy that's becoming cheaper. We all know it's cleaner, and more businesses are starting to take notice. We've got to double down on a clean energy industry that's never been more promising. Doubling the clean energy we use.
In investing in clean energy.
To jumpstart a homegrown clean energy industry.
So remember when President Obama touted the future of green energy and pumped billions of tax dollars into solar power production? Well, today the industry's future looks dim as investments into green energy are beginning now to dry up.
Fox Business Network's Shivani Joshi joins us right now to explain. So as the subsidies dry up, so does the business, because?
Well, because there's, tons of jobs, and the entire industry is reliant upon these billions of dollars, and we know where those billions have gotten us. I mean, according to my research, 1/10 of 1% of the grid comes from solar power. So you think about the money that's gone in, billions, and the output, almost nothing, right? And so now Wall Street, this is a big business issue, and what everyone is talking about is what's going to happen with the solar industry, what's going to happen with those billions, what's going to happen with those jobs that he said they were going to be created, and clearly the nation is in need of jobs. They're just not coming from solar right now.
Sure. So if we take a look at the failed subsidized solar companies, there are, unfortunately, are a lot of them. Solyndra, everyone remembers that.
Well, this is not a good track record here, certainly, and we know what the checkered past has been for President Obama and his statements about the solar industry and what the subsidies are providing. The one thing I want to make mention, I mean, subsidies in and of themselves are not a bad thing. We see it happen in the technology industry. It happened with nuclear, even happened with the oil industry. But the problem is that the solar industry has never proved that it can take the training wheels off of additional funds and run on its own. Now people are saying, well, solar may be dead in the water. What's going to happen with nat gas? I mean, I know you guys know this very well. We've got 100 years of energy. It's much cleaner than coal out of producing 50% less CO2. There's lots of great reasons and jobs, frankly, right? So many people are talking about on Wall Street and the business industry, okay, let's take our focus off of solar, let's move it to nat gas, and let's get this economy going because it's about time.
Because that's really what we have a lot of. But, the United States simply hasn't figured out how to do solar effectively and cheaply. You look at the country of Germany, It's working out great for them.
It is working out great for them, and we just have to figure out where we want to be as a nation. I mean, the problem is that with the solar industry, you have the Chinese coming in and undercutting the markets, and so that's what the subsidies were doing. It was making us more competitive with the Chinese. Well, then they start to cut prices again, and then we start to throw more money. That's not a viable business solution.
What was Germany doing correct? Are they just a smaller country that made it more feasible?
They're a smaller country, and they've got lots of sun, right? They've got a lot more sun than we do, and the problem is it's a cloudy day and it's raining, you're not going to have it. I mean, this nation is vast and beautiful in its makeup. In California, it's a great solution. Here on the East Coast, it's just not going to work. So you have to have a little bit more of a mixed solution. Of course, nat gas is a big part of that too.
Because we got plenty of that.
Yep.
All right, Shivani, we thank you very much for joining us today for the business.
Media outlet, and my question for you can also, I'll give you some opportunities to respond to things brought up there. That is my phone, little one. Good choice, though. What are some of the biggest obstacles to addressing climate change? And Dior, because it ended on talking about how sunny Germany is, I don't know how many of you have been there. Can you tell us a little bit about this map?
Well, this shows the solar radiation, and actually you can see that Spain and most of US have wonderful condition for solar radiation. That means can use solar thermal or solar PV. Germany is comparable with regard to solar with Alaska. Nevertheless,
the sunniest state.
Very sunny state. I think Texas has 2 to 3 times as much solar radiation. So if you put a solar panel over here, you harvest double or triple the amount of kilowatt hours compared to Germany.
And Marita, I'd love to come to you. A couple things when we had talked earlier, and you can certainly respond to the video as well, but were a couple things that you had said were hard for you is misinformation and denial, as well as special interests. So I have a couple little pictures we found up there. And I wonder if you can talk more about those, your thoughts on that.
Well, clearly, I think that video sort of speaks for itself in a lot of ways. There was a lot of misinformation in that clip from Fox News, not surprisingly. But, you know, I mean, Texas, as you mentioned, has more solar power potential, enough to actually power the world. So this business that the U.S. isn't sunny enough to support solar energy is silly. You know, unfortunately in Texas, you know, New Jersey, they talked about the East Coast as well, not being sunny, but to date, New Jersey, Delaware, they have more solar capacity than Texas does. So, you know, it also mentioned natural gas and that the training wheels are off for the oil and gas industry, which is also not true. They've been given billions of dollars in subsidies in the form of various tax breaks, incentives since 1918, and they still today have not taken the training wheels off. So to pretend that it's somehow an even playing field out there for all types of energy is just not accurate. So this is unfortunate that we have solutions out there, and unfortunately that there is sort of an effort to misinform the public. Obviously, they list all these Solyndra scandals and you know, they pick and choose and cherry pick the data. But clearly, you know, again, Texas has the largest potential for solar power in the nation. We also, for other types of energy efficiency technologies like demand response, we have the largest potential for that. Energy efficiency, obviously the best energy to use is what we don't use. So efficiency,
and we'll get to that.
Is a big portion of it. So again, you know, it's just unfortunate that we have people out there that are sort of trying to thwart moving progress going forward. But I don't think they're going to win. So.
Yeah, and Deborah, I'm wondering if you have something to add to that.
I just think a lot of it is misinformation, even on the consumer side. It's seen as that solar and green is just expensive. I mean, just to be honest, with a lot of people who are not in the energy world or not familiar with that, they just see it as a more expensive option, and that's all it is an option. You know, that doesn't go to any serious prevention of any problem that affects them. It just is something that someone keeps telling them needs to happen, that costs them more money on a daily basis. And I think unless we find a way of making it equally affordable and making it accessible, we can kind of talk to her blue in the face about a possibility of changing things, and that's not going to happen, until people really, as a mass population, buy onto the fact that the cost of it is consistent with the quality of life that we're going to have going forward.
And I just wanted to add on to that. I mean, the price of solar panels has dropped 80% since 2008. That's significant. Furthermore, I think that once people invest in the infrastructure, I mean, you can essentially, I work on a project in Austin called Pecan Street. It's a smart grid demonstration. There are residents there who haven't paid Austin Energy in 4 years. That's pretty affordable. I mean, there are options and there's help to get people help loans and investment, and then essentially you can either be paid or you're saving for sure, and then oftentimes you can be paid for putting solar back onto the grid. So
and Dominic, something that was also brought up in the segment was about subsidies and them failing, and we threw in a little statistic from the International Energy Agency that in 2013 fossil fuel subsidies totaled $550 billion globally, which was 4 times the amount devoted to clean energy, and that's often not part of the conversation. And something you had talked about was that a lot of money is going towards what you had called a profitable status quo. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's a lot to say about this. If I can backtrack just a second to address this, I think that, 2 things. One, it is a profitable status quo, and there's a lot of money that's invested, obviously, in maintaining this. We should also, just in the interest of honesty, say that the oil and gas industry does have a lot of jobs connected with it, a lot of good jobs for people. And I think the front lines of the climate fight are going to be based in part on sort of trying to find ways to create credible alternatives where you can have good jobs that are based on renewable energy technologies too. And so far that's been difficult. And there is also a class issue involved too. A lot of the jobs that are associated with oil and gas are sort of working class jobs, well paid, whereas the sort of renewable energy jobs seem to often be sort of the white collar jobs too. So there's a class issue that's involved in this too. But that said, no matter how good the job is, if it destroys the planet, it's not a good job, right? So we have to find a way as a society to move past that. I think the German economic, or sort of rather energy miracle, as it's sometimes put, wasn't not because it's so sunny. I spent a lot of time in Germany. It's a lovely country, but it's not a sunny one. But really because it was a policy decision. The very, very brilliant man named Hermann Scheer, S-C-H-E-E-R, wrote a book called The Solar Economy. I highly recommend to anyone here. Helped spearhead an effort to create a feed-in tariff law that forced, among other things, utility companies to buy energy from renewable sources from small providers that actually gave, a little different than the sort of subsidies we've seen in the United States, that actually made the sort of solar energy business viable in Germany and led to Germany becoming a solar energy powerhouse across the world. So I think that, it's not that these forms of energy can't be profitable, right? But that we have to be designed in such a way that they can be profitable, especially to everyday people or sort of groups of people who might want to get together and put, a solar array on their homes and things like that. So we have a real policy gap here. But the final issue I'll mention on this too is that Germany is a place that is not maybe mining its coal as actively as it once did, and so forth. And so in a sense, those fossil fuel jobs have already moved on. It makes it less of a pressing political issue than it does in the United States, where in a lot of states people say we can't switch because then we'll lose our jobs, we'll lose our livelihoods.
And I'm going to pause you because we are definitely coming back to that. So save the rest of that. And I want to introduce kind of the next component of this, which is a very important one. And this is a video from Texas. Take a look.
Think about it from this vantage point. You worked your whole life. You now own a little small piece of the pie. You got a home in the inner city. And natural gas companies come in. You're getting less amount off your property now. The value has gone down. And what big business sees as valuable is that what is underneath your property. So they take that which is most valuable to them raise your taxes and fees in order to take your property, and then leave you holding the bag. And that is what becomes the American dream. Hi, my name is Kiev Tatum. I'm a member here at Harmony Missionary Baptist Church, the social minister here.
I'm an assistant to Pastor Frank D. Lawson at the Harmony Missionary Baptist Church.
I am the pastor of the Harmony Missionary Baptist Church.
One of the main things the gas is doing is dividing our community. Some are making money off of this gas, while others are getting sick off of this gas. So for those who are making the money, it's their blessing, but for those who are getting sick, it has become a curse on our community. So one would ask, when you ask that question, is it in our best interest to have them drilling in our communities? And those of us who've seen the impact thus far say absolutely not. It's profit above people. And anytime profit supersedes people, then that's not in the best interest of our neighborhood.
How do we address some of these inequities that are brought up in that video? Climate.
Well, there's a whole movement globally that attempts to address that, and it's called the climate justice movement. You know, that example in Texas could be repeated in Ogoni, Nigeria, or it could be in Ecuador, it could be in Louisiana, it could be in a lot of places, and unfortunately, a lot of the people who are on the front line are the ones that get very few benefits from the extraction. And if you take, for example, here in Houston, look at Houston Ship Channel neighborhoods and the impact of refineries and chemical companies and all of that, and you look at who gets the jobs and who gets sick. And those things are very different. And so there's, as I said before, there's a whole movement that attempts to address this issue and moving. I think the problem is not the science. We have the science. The only problem that gets in the way is called political science. And the fact that we have all of the technology know-how to address a lot of these issues, but there are certain geographic locations, populations that are considered expendable, and the price of doing business. And that has to change. And if we are to address global warming and climate change, we have to understand that there can be no sacrifice zones, and there can be no people that can be sacrificed here in Houston, or here in the United States, or around the world. And that's the universal, the thing that has to be addressed. And because it's only planet Earth that we're talking about, we haven't figured out how to get somewhere else and stay.
And Marita, I'd love to come to you, because something that you had started talking about earlier, but when we had talked earlier, was about this idea of monetizing some of these things can provide opportunities for some of those teams, particularly if we're talking about alternatives. Can you tell me a little bit more?
Sure. So, I think it's exciting. I like to talk about kind of the new energy revolution is the democratization of energy, because I think for the first time, technology is enabling us to kind of harness energy in a way that we've never been able to. And I think that this gives people that would typically not be empowered the opportunity to generate their own energy. And I think for areas that are low income or have been disenfranchised for decades, this distributed solar generation, rooftop solar, and other kind of in-home smart technologies can provide them a way not only to see information that has been otherwise sort of hidden from all of us for a long time, which is our energy data, but to actually do something about it, to have actionable information. I think community solar opportunities, people in rural areas, people that just want to not be on a grid anymore even, potentially. This provides a lot of options for a lot of people. of all income levels. And I think as we move into this new chapter, I think we have to make sure that from the get-go, everyone is coming along with us. And so at EDF, we work on a lot of different avenues, and environmental justice is sort of centered to that as well. So that, that this isn't just, while a lot of people can afford, that are of higher incomes or can afford, Nest thermostats, and that's great because they're helping to ultimately bring the prices down for everyone. We have to make sure that the people that can benefit the most from energy conservation, low-income people and disenfranchised communities spend more of their income on energy than other people do. So that impact is felt much harder. So I think the idea that these types of technologies are for the elite or for the rich is actually quite wrong, because I think it's going to help people of lower incomes more than anyone, frankly.
Yeah, and that feeds perfectly into my question for you, Deborah. Is you had talked about your experience in the education system, particularly here in Houston, about just having access to both information, but also some of those technology that Marina's talking about. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Well, I think what we tend to see, I was a teacher for HISD for 2 years, and I've been in the education field for the last 13. And I think a lot of it comes with mishandling. There's a lot of dumping of kind of scientific information with no real information. It's kind of just, here this is, but there's no practical application. Even within the schools, you see a large spark in monetary funds being forced into science and math, which is great. Those things are awesome and great. But if there's no teacher that's qualified to teach it, or there's no application when they walk outside of those school doors, that's not going to be something that's tangible to those students. They're not going to see how it relates to their community. They're not going to become invested in it. It's just going to become another history book that they take with them, that they have the information for, but have no application skills. And so I think even in thinking about all this, we still need to figure out, it's almost that educating the consumer part, right? Of people not only just having the information or knowing that the resources exist, but knowing that there's an accessibility of those resources in their specific community, and that those things help benefit their community as well as the world we hold.
And one more, Dominic, I'd love to hear, because a lot of your work at your center is about also to reach a broader audience and to use creativity in a way. So something you had talked about was your work in that. Can you explain a little bit how that might help access more diverse audience?
Yeah, what our center does is it's really about bringing the arts and the humanities and the social sciences into dialogues about our energy and environmental challenges today. So it's not just about policy, it's not just about science and engineering. Those things are super important. We all know that without the right technologies, without the right policy, we'll never get to where we need to be. But at the same time, the sort of energy environmental challenges we face are about values, they're about ethics, they're about understandings and worldviews and ideas. And those are, domains that I think, the humanities and the arts can make a really important impact in. So we have, social scientists who are thinking about things like, what does the fifth ward look like in 2050? How can we make that infrastructure so that it's going to be just, like you said, not something that's going to leave out people, but it's going to bring everyone up with the energy transitions that are coming. And we also, work with artists who I think it's great because artists have different ways of thinking about things, and maybe sometimes we're too limited by sort of a narrow focus on costs and things like that, cost structures, right? We need to sometimes break out of those paradigms to actually get those sort of breakthrough leaps that we need. So, I think that it is really important to think creatively, because we're living in a moment which is, it's got to be an experimental moment, because we have some of what we need in terms of technology and policies, proven solutions that work, but especially in places that are resistant or where people don't want to hear the message anymore, we have to find ways to break through them. And I think the arts are really important.
Great. So we're going to keep moving, and we're actually getting to money. So we have a really short video here, but I think brings up a great few topics about money.
The most expensive thing we can do about climate change is fail to solve it.
Talking about it. And my question is, so, we're here to talk about money and climate. So how does money fit into the equation? And I'd love to come back to you and think about, up here we have a little dice that says cost, risk, and benefit. And oftentimes we think of a cost-benefit analysis when we're thinking about doing things, particularly within our current systems. So what are the costs of taking action, and what are some of the costs and benefits and risks of not taking action? It's a big question. You don't have to answer all of it.
I wish I had my maps. I could show you an overlay of the United States, for example, and draw a line across the U.S. and look at the Mason-Dixon line and draw it across and see where the poorest population, the people population that's uninsured, the population that has the worst health and the worst access to health, the population that has, in terms of physical well-being, and you start looking at education, income, poverty, where climate change poses the greatest risk in terms of droughts, severe weather events, flooding. You start naming those things, and you'll see that the population that's at greatest risk, also geographically, spatially, and politically, the impacts, the negative impacts of climate change will be not just a economic blip, but will be devastating. The people that feel the impacts of climate change first, worst, and longest are the same populations that also feel economic disasters first, worst, and longest. Mm-hmm. And so when you overlay race, class, geographic vulnerability, you look at air quality, you look at all those things, the externalities, the cost that's not, that's oftentimes hidden, health cost of bad air, in terms of ground level ozone, in terms of emissions from these dirty fossil fuel power plants and all those things. The impact of not doing what we need to do, and when you look at those numbers, it's staggering. Mm-hmm. And I think, for example, the annual cost of asthma, for example, just one disease related to the environment, it's $57 billion a year. $1 billion. We could do a whole lot in educating our kids with $57 billion. So I think the price of, or the cost of not doing, it's a tremendous cost. And I think that's, the health costs, climate change and health, and climate change and vulnerable population, and the most vulnerable population in our society is children. Yeah. And if we don't think about taking care of the next generation and the next generation, next generation, we are lost as a people.
Yes, definitely. And then also you brought up the point of we could use that money for education, but also kids would be able to learn better if they weren't suffering from asthma and weren't having to take days off of school. So it goes so much deeper. Dominic, I'd love to come to you, because you had said something that's interesting. Again, coming back to this idea of, where does money fit into the picture here? Of actually looking at oil prices and how, in terms of renewables and acting on climate, there can both be positives for oil prices going up and positives for oil prices going down in terms of climate action. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so hard because, markets are complicated things, and you never know what the decisive factor is. Usually with oil, it's about production or expected production.
A little bit closer.
Yes. But sometimes there are discounts put in there. You wonder if maybe part of the reason why the price of oil is declining is because people are looking longer term and they're seeing demand slacking. Not just because there's been a recession recently, but maybe because people realize that finally the message is beginning to get out there that we need to transition, right? And that people are using less oil and gas than they have in the past. And maybe that's, I'm saying that's the optimistic side of it. Of course, when oil and gas prices are high, then that makes renewables seem less expensive. But I really want to underscore this point that was just made, that those prices of energy almost never take into account the environmental impacts that these forms of fuel bring with them. So that you don't get to hear about I mean, to take a different case entirely, nuclear energy, right? It's never the price of cleanup from accidents is never costed into the price per kilowatt hour, right? And there are certain forms of energy that look clean and they're fine until they're not, and you have a Fukushima or Chernobyl, and then it's devastating. And because you can't insure these types of plants on the private market, it becomes a public liability, right? And I think oil and gas isn't quite that dramatic, but a lot of the same issues are involved with toxicity, right? And the broader sorts of what economists used to call neighborhood effects that are generated by these sorts of fuel uses.
Yeah. And I'd love you to pass it over to Deborah, because you had also spoken about this idea of money and just allocating money in terms of resources, and coming back to some of the issues you were saying of communities getting different, having different impacts and access and opportunities. You had said up here, it's a little cartoon that says, how would you solve this problem? And the kid says, throw money at it. And you had spoken of some experiences that just putting money somewhere doesn't always address the issue. Can you explain that?
I mean, I've been in schools where there's an 85 to 99% illiteracy rate, and they have brand new computer labs. That's not gonna help. Like the students don't know which button to push because they can't read power. You know what I mean? Like, let's just be realistic and say, it's great to have those resources. I'm not saying that those resources are a negative thing, but I think they need to be put in areas where they're going to be used the correct way. If you have a situation where, now we have probably the most money spent in science and math that we've had in years, and at the same time, the lowest critical thinking scores we've had in years. The lowest critical reading scores we've had in years. I mean, so obviously the ability to solve a problem mathematically and scientifically is not transferring over to our real life applications, right? I think that, we have the idea of money is the only problem, especially in a lot of our lower income schools and lower income communities, when that's not the only problem. We can throw money at it and it will sit there, I've also known schools that have huge allocations for all kinds of resources, and they don't know how to spend them correctly because they don't know how to use money that's marked straight for science and math when all of their students are struggling in other subjects, in other areas. And so it just really comes in a way of us looking at, when we get down to the basic education portion of it, what are the specific needs of the communities and schools, and not just saying blanket, we can take a whole city like Houston that's so diverse, right? Probably one of the most diverse cities in the nation, and put a Band-Aid on a wound that's bleeding in 7 different places.
Well said. And you're totally shifting now to you, but I think also speaking some to this idea of money, and that there also is opportunity in money. And this is from an article recently about energy efficiency may be the key to saving trillions. And that was from about a couple weeks ago. And then you probably remember this from our first salon together. Can you explain what's going on there and some of the thoughts of how money might play a role in taking action?
Well, yeah, this is one of the businesses who have a lot of profit from the new development. But I would like to start a little bit earlier. So we looked at economic equations many years ago, and I think that the most famous one in 2006 was Sir Nicholas Stern, who compared the costs of climate climate change and the damages with the protection of climate change. And the costs were in the order of 1/10 of the global GDP in the midst of the century. And if we do everything we can do, that would only cost 1% of the GDP, basically. And we did that equation in Germany as well when we were looking for different options of energy policy. And the traditional policy in the long term was much more expensive than the new one. And everybody's now claiming, well, Germany spends a lot of money for the energy transition. But actually, I mean, this is maybe not a very good example for that, because that's a very fancy business. So like Tesla, I wouldn't call that a 100% environmental or clean energy thing, but definitely it's a sexy thing and everybody likes it. Anyway, so even with very basic business working on clean energy can earn some money, but maybe not that steep thing. I don't think economically that's viable, that's sustainable. If people start to make 3,000% profit in a few years, I don't think that's viable. But anyway, it's a good example how technology develops, and we will need electric cars in the future, and for that, this is a nice business.
Wonderful, thank you. And so now we're going to you have another audience participation, and we always make it a little bit exciting because we time you. And I feel like anytime you put a clock up there and start the start clock, there's something in us that gets us going. So this is a little opportunity because particularly, you come here because you're somehow interested in this topic. But it's very important for us to not only to talk to each other, and hopefully you meet some new people in the room, but to talk outside of this room, to get our conversations and these topics to new people, to new audiences, to different perspectives. So our challenge for you, and we're going to give you 5 minutes to do it. You can also get a new plate of food and a drink while you're doing it, but you only have 5 minutes to complete your task, is how do you see your community coming together to address climate? So we're going for the hopeful part. How are they coming together? And you can define community however you want. The U.S. could be your community, or it could be your neighborhood, or it could be your family. So interpret it as you will. And so I ask you to share that with a person near you that you don't know.
Okay, so it's 3708, paper plastic.
Plastic. That's the magic word. Green police. You picked the wrong day to mess with the ecosystem, plastic boy.
Battery! Let's go, take the house, come on! Put the rind down! Sir, that's a compost infraction!
Did you install these bulbs?
Oh.
Tragedy strikes tonight where a man has just been arrested for possession of an incandescent light bulb.
What do you guys think about plastic bottles now? The water setting is at 105.
You got a TDI here? Clean diesel. You're good to go, sir.
Good afternoon, officers. Back to those styrofoam cups you're drinking from? Yeah. Gentlemen, please step out of the car and put them on the hood.
So I should have asked you, what on earth do you think I'm going to ask in terms of questions? But I think this could, like I said, be the dream come true and the worst nightmare for diverse people. So I'm curious, and I'm going to just have this be an open, quick conversation about, so how much policy and regulation do we need? So I'm using the word need rather than want, specifically. So I'd like to, does anyone have a strong feeling about that? You're holding a microphone.
Well, I'll jump in. First, as funny as that is, I think unfortunately we encounter some people who actually think that is kind of what we want to do, and miss the humor within that. Especially when we're talking about smart homes, and they think the big brother is going to come and tell you that you're washing your dishwasher at an off-peak time and you're going to get in trouble. That's not the case, but I think in a state like Texas, I focus on Texas policy. We have for our clean energy work, we have a 9-state strategy, and in each state it's much different. We focus on the 9 biggest energy producers and consumers states in the country. In areas where you have more amenable, like California, where you have, obviously, they have a carbon trading statute, right? You're going to get some more progress. They just had a mandate for energy storage. That's going to lead, I think, the rest of the country forward in terms of R&D. In Texas, we don't really have mandates like that. The last one that we really had that was significant was in '99 when they deregulated the energy market, and we got a wind RPS, which led us to become the leader in wind in the country. But that was a compromise, and that was a unique situation. So what we focus on is what we can do in lieu of regulation. A lot of times, for the kind of in the minutia of the regulatory issues that we deal with, there are barriers that are obstacles. And so when we're talking about regulations, we're often talking about removing some of these barriers so that there's more of a free market approach to some of these disruptive technologies. And also sort of what areas in terms of like when we, on-bill repayment is a form of financing for clean energy and energy efficiency projects, bringing in private third-party institutions like Citibank and others. I think when we look for avenues around regulation in Texas, we're focused on that. So
right. So there are alternatives.
You need also regulation as well, but in lieu of that, I think there's also there's some good opportunities in the private market too.
Yeah, and Georg, I'd love to go to you because Germany certainly has quite a bit of policy, and that's something that you work a lot on. So what's your opinion when we're looking at these issues of how much regulation and policy do we need?
Well, in general, I'm a fan of the market, but I have to admit that the market doesn't function in certain areas. So, and when we look back, so we had a lot of air pollution and water pollution, and there started awareness of that in the, let's say, 60s, 70s. And nowadays we can say, well, we have solved the problem in many cases with a good combination of regulation and market instruments. So today the water and the air quality in Europe and most parts of Europe is much, much better than 20 years ago when I grew up actually. And so in case of the climate, I think we need regulation because carbon doesn't really have a price. So carbon damages a lot, but it doesn't have a price, and it's very difficult to identify. So you don't smell it, you don't get sick of it in the first day. So you need something which is not integrated with the market, and that is kind of regulation. And therefore, sad to say, I would love if the market would regulate that by itself, but it definitely does not.
And we're going to come back to talking, and other people will certainly be able to add into this. But I want to transition to thinking about what could it look like? What type of vision do we have? And here's a vision from a company I'm sure you're all quite familiar with. So. Coming from major energy and fossil fuel as well as some renewables company, and that's their vision for what U.S. energy will look like. And I'm wondering for you, what energy future do we want? Do we agree with this picture? Is that what we're working towards or wanting or agree is possible? And I would love to start with Dominic. Some of your work is studying impacts of renewables and infrastructure developing, and I think this is an interesting picture of kind of like the old technology and new technology in the same space. And I'm wondering if you have something to say about what energy future
So part of my research concerns renewable energy development in the global south, so sort of in the developing world. And I've spent about a couple of years ago, living in southern Mexico in the middle of the densest terrestrial sort of on-land wind development in the world. And what I've learned in that experience is that whereas renewables are excellent, and I think overall, helping to sort of get us towards the energy future we want and need, it has to be done the right way, because actually the wind development is extraordinarily contentious, and a lot of wind parks take a lot of land, and in this case the land is owned by indigenous peoples who feel that they're not seeing a lot of profit benefit for. These aren't people who use a lot of electricity, these aren't people who've added a lot to the carbon emissions of the planet, and yet they're being asked to sacrifice their land, they feel, to sort of bear the costs of problems that countries like ours have created. So it's a very complex ethical issue, and it's not just how shifting from one fuel source to another, but it really matters how that is done, that it's done in a way that takes seriously communities, especially disadvantaged communities, that it makes them partners in the process of development, and that it also includes goals for community development that might be other than our goals, which in this case were largely the sort of the goal of reducing carbon emissions, and also creating a profitable new business in renewable energy. Those are the two principal goals that the Mexican state and international investors were interested in. And noble though those goals are, and important as they are, we have to do it in a very careful way. So I would just say that as a general.
Yeah. And Dr. Fuller, here's something to add. What is your vision for future of energy? What does it look like?
Very similar. I think as we move to a green energy, clean energy, renewable future, I think we have to can't assume that everybody's going to be moving along and getting access equally. This has never been the case, and so that means that there has to be some concerted effort to ensure that. As he just said, in terms of the benefits that accrue to moving to that new energy source, don't somehow have unintended consequences. And this has always been the case of in moving policy along, where there are things that have not been considered or have been given low priority, and I think that's something that the climate justice movement has been advocating for since its inception. These are very important issues, and I think transitioning to or transitioning from this old energy source to this new one, I think we have enough brain power to ensure that those kinds of inequitable results don't end up building on inequity. That's important, and it's not just here in the U.S. It's also true in other parts of the world, and particularly in the global south.
Yeah, and Marita, you have a lot of examples. This was something you're very familiar with. What type of energy future do you see?
Well, I agree with that video and what everyone has said so far, but and I think to sort of add on to this idea of bringing everyone in at the same time, I think.
Can you hold the mic?
Sure. I think we've when we're looking at renewables and we're looking at this new energy landscape, the focus, I think we're more focused now than we have been in past times. There's a lot more scrutiny, I think, in asking these questions versus sort of just running with something and then realizing the consequences and trying to mitigate them after the fact. I think there's a lot more awareness at the outset of this next movement going forward, which is good. I think there are a lot of challenges ahead, though, in the minutiae of regulations and how the market is going to play out. Utilities are basically in the business now of asking their customers to use less of their product. How are they going to survive that? Are we in the business of saving utilities? I don't know. some companies are coming in and disrupting them completely. And I think that's fine, and that'll play out. But you know, renewables ultimately, you know, if we're all sort of generating our own electricity, what does that end look like? And I don't know what kind of market structures are we going to have that embrace that. That's not necessarily growth. There's not a profit margin necessarily. I mean, once you're harnessing the sun, after a certain point, if you have it on your house, as like I said, mentioned earlier, the example of the people involved in our Pecan Street project who don't pay Austin Energy anymore. Well, where does that go? Where does that market go? You know, maybe that's just becomes something that we don't pay for anymore, and it's not part of our economy. We have to come up with new, and that's I think where the idea of being very creative comes into play as we look forward as to what kind of a system, both environmentally, economically, energy we're going to have going forward. Yeah. But I think these are questions that utilities want to know now. These are questions that you know, are not necessarily, I could philosophically discuss them, but some people are in the business of not wanting to move until that answer is there. Yeah. So, you know, I think it looks hopeful, but it's going to take it's challenging to get there.
In New York, you often, again, we've used this image a bit. When you talk about energy future, you bring in some very optimistic things that exist right now. So can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, of course. We see that a lot of communities are changing their energy supply, and particularly in Germany, but in other parts as well, some people got really enthusiastic to produce their own energy. And we have a couple of very nice villages who started very low-key, and then they found out there are several solutions possible. They started with biogas, and then they used solar and wind, and combined heat and power. And particularly one energy community in Germany, North Rhine-Westphalia, is quite interesting. They now produce 3 times the amount of energy they need. And they started just 15 years ago. And I mean, the BP clip, I think it's really fascinating. So if you go back 20 years or so, it would have been impossible that BP said things like that. But of course, clearly, with regard to climate policy, this is not enough. I mean, 30% renewables in this country until the mid of the century is clearly not your potential. I mean, you can harvest much more and in a very beneficial way. So this is a BP perspective, that's fantastic, but it will develop. So, and with these little communities, you have very positive examples how that works. I mean, they didn't know how to do it 10 years ago, and now they're doing it. So that's quite fascinating.
Well, I want to go. I want to see it. I want to see it in practice, and see it here in Texas and in New York. So now I'm really excited to have Deborah, also known as Deep, to shift and to provide us with a live performance. And then we're in the home stretch. We only have a couple more questions. So you guys are, if you're getting sleepy, I hope you're not, you're nearly there. So Deep, we're ready for you. Can you pass on the microphones? Actually, lights on, please.
You know, the darkness is always awesome. So when I talked to Tara first, and we discussed about the kind of piece to bring, I have some work that I've done, you know, that's been more of Go Green campaigns that I've done in communities. I got to work with a great organization called Life is Living that comes to urban communities and brings sustainability festivals to celebrate, you know, what are the things that we're already doing to sustain ourselves. But the biggest thing that we kind of talked about and got to chat about was really just the displacement of resources, as we discussed earlier. And so this piece is definitely fictional, but I guess it's realistic fiction, right? Based off of experiences I've had with students and watching communities transform over a very short period of time to exclude populations that are the very ones they should be including. So hopefully I can do this. I may need to sit just for the sake of being able to roll through this. All right, here we go. They say the bell tolls for no man, but there's a child who finds solace in the ringing every morning, a hearkening to come inside its doors, to hunger for knowing there is more than the pavement's voice to hear, calling her name like a toe tag. This child has dreams bigger than she knows what to do with, and this classroom is supposed to be her greener grass, This weed of a feeder school and a lush garden of bodies. She wants so much to hear a story of someone who sounds like she looks somewhere that she's not. So she finds solace in the ringing every morning, hearkens the cold not to chase her here, listens for the crack of books spine so familiar to her own. She has heard there is an abandoned room next to a brand new computer lab that holds hope like all things still pinned on pages, long-lost love notes in manuscript. There, where science is silent and all the decimals don't always equal change, but there is a worthy space stacked high and forgotten that looks like the father she has never afforded the chance to meet, that there is value in the invaluable of her voice. She may matter there. So she's gone looking past the paper trails, behind the certificates and state-of-the-art everything, under the commendations, around the discharge and rehire of transplant teachers who don't speak her swagger. She ducks inside between benchmark tests, fights the rats for what's left of textbook or novel, settles for a found poem she builds out of the leftover words that no one else seems to need anymore. She wonders if her language is still needed anymore. This magnet school seems only to attract money for the things that stay shiny longer than dog-eared pages and mumbling mouths. There's no need to hold on to a hardback when you can have a MacBook. No need to teach textual analysis when you can Bing Spark Notes. She wishes that her teacher still knew how to kindle a passion to learn, but settles for testing like fire drills. They promise with shrink-wrapped tongues that this year, in the 6 weeks after the test is done, they're gonna build something. Gonna shape a bell with their bare hands and learn what it does. Gonna write outside the 26 lines, gonna get a new library with the new money the state's been promising, and they are gonna learn how to ring. Loud enough for no man but every child, they promise. Easy like summer break, accommodations, broadening horizons, promise new stricter standards and longer applications, promise they will let all the neighborhood kids in when they finish renovating their towers, promise lies and more dollars, promise lies and longer bus rides, gone words like exceptional and commended, sell Birdline tickets to a shell of the same thing dressed in a New Year neighborhood, but this time she feels like no man, just a girl with a heart that's never been good at balancing equations. They promise they will consider letting her back in when her test scores go up, but for now, for her to just ignore the ringing like it wasn't made for her kind.
What is that called?
It's called, I haven't given a title yet. Like, horrible, the one question I don't need you to answer, I'm just playing. I have not named it yet. What do you think it should be called? I take suggestions.
I mean, I don't know, it's just so intense.
Thank you.
There's a lot of things going on, so I don't know, you gotta have something which makes it all fit together, I mean.
Call it the tax test.
I have a phone that's very similar to that. I would think of
yeah, we'll have a drop out.
You will prompt me to think of a title.
Do you have it up online somewhere?
I do not currently. I wrote it actually specifically for this event. So so it wasn't something that I had before, but when you be able to think about this topic and translate it into a more artistic format.
Yeah, I like to get a copy, and also, if you don't mind, I like to have a little poem as well.
Great. I have a quick question. How long will it be?
It's like 10 lines.
Perfect.
It's a lot shorter than yours.
Cool. I love it.
All right, so this one is basically about pollution, and I wrote it, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. So it's called Wherein Lies Progress. All right. So wherein lies progress? Swimming in glowing haze of leaden fog, breaths raging, lungs crushed with smog, legs rushing me inside to an iron shell, man-made shelter in this man-made hell. Outside lies a silhouette of a dying tree, skyline smokestacks dance lazily free. Murky trails rooted in economic demands to cherish ravages of 1,000 lands. 1,000 heavens blotted, stained, such is the price of progress attained. The vacant ether draws ever nearer. Shall we ever rise from our stupor? The void through which our planet runs, a change must brush through every nation, for progress stems not from devastation. All right.
Thank you. That's our first impromptu performance. Thank you very much.
All right, cool. Sorry for interrupting.
No, not at all. Hey, anytime it's creative performance. Well, who's up for the interpretive dance? Later. All right, so after that inspiration, where'd the presentation go?
think you ought to name it after your
There we go.
daughter, because
It's
it
back
sounds
to
a
the-
lot like her future.
All right, so
It's a little better than that, isn't it?
we're good. So I showed a film made by BP, and then this is a film by a comedy troupe, actually out of New York, about BP. So we've got a couple of perspectives here. Take a look.
According to the charts, that's the best plan of action.
Yeah, great. Don't worry about it. It's a small spill on a very large table.
Sir, I think we are underestimating just how much coffee was spilled.
Yeah, that's a lot of coffee.
Well, we better hurry up because it's almost reached my laptop.
Calm down, calm down. Boom.
It's also going to destroy all the fish.
Oh boy. Okay. Boom. Look at that.
My God, it's encroaching on my map of Louisiana.
Okay. Okay. Look. Oh no. Fish.
Laptop.
Okay.
Map.
Okay. I'm sorry. Look. Oh no. Fish.
Laptop.
Wait. I've got a brilliant idea.
Oh. Okay. Jones, you gotta hurry up. I think the public is getting suspicious.
All set. Damn. Didn't work.
Oh my God, we are really screwed now.
Look, garbage will fall into the coffee cups, stopping further spillage.
Now there's just coffee and garbage.
Wait, I've got an idea. Damn, I really thought that would work.
Well, maybe it doesn't work right away. Let's observe it for 3 hours and then reassess it.
Okay. We just wasted 3 hours. Damn it.
That's everything I've got.
God.
And I happen to love humor for a way to introduce some pretty tough topics. So I think a lot of us know there are a lot of really serious things we can talk about here, and a lot of things that probably hit very close to home as well. So the question I have for you guys is, this is an example of being very reactive to a problem that some may have foreseen and some didn't foresee. But certainly when we look at climate, we're often in the reactive. So I'm curious, how can we be more proactive about it? And I have this open. Does anyone want to take a stab at that? How can we encourage being proactive? Yeah.
So I think one way is just acknowledging the ways that we're already going about sustaining ourselves, the ways that we are already approaching looking at our economy in a different way. The fact that in, the same neighborhoods that we may talk about have the, more toxicity from the plants and things of that nature, probably are the ones that have the most garbage as well. There's things that we're already doing that are innately, self-preservatory. That's not a word, but you get my point. They preserve self, right? And the idea that we can take those things and enhance them. Instead, I think a lot of times we get caught trying to look at what the 30-year projection and the 50-year projection is, and for the normal person, that's probably nothing that they're going to take in on a day-to-day basis, But seeing what are the small steps that we're already taking, and how can we enhance those to make them even more impactful and even better? That, I think, starts a train of thought of what is proactive.
Someone else want to add?
I think we talk a lot, and specifically to energy, about the prosumer, and I think that kind of intertwines as well. And
the prosumer.
Prosumer, right?
Okay, so consumer.
Right. And as I mentioned before about just what new energy opportunities sort of allow for us to achieve, I think that enables people to become prosumers. They can choose different methods of powering their lives. And I think that technology also at the same time, that can be daunting. For energy nerds like me, that's cool, but for other people that's daunting and they don't want to have to do that. But technology then will allow us to sort of set it and forget it and to do things where really the only kind of action you have to take is programming something once and then you're doing it already. So I think ease is helpful. And I think that, again, disruptive technologies allow for that.
Great. Dominic, you want to add a little?
Sure. I would say that, and again, absolutely, the technology is really important. I think that given where we are politically in this country right now, what we need is a really active climate movement, which has come leaps and bounds in just even the past year. in terms of, I think that the type of gridlock and impasse that we face is only going to be broken by people caring enough to sort of get out and march. And we saw that in New York in the fall. I think that there have been a lot of points in American history where we've had impasses that citizens have had to do and run around, and I think that's where we are. It's got to be, we have to use everything at our disposal, which means talking to industry and trying to help them to change their cultures, doing things at home in terms of our own energy consumption. But I think we have to make it a very public political issue and make a statement that change has to come, or else it'll continue to be. I think right now there's a lot of money in keeping things the way they are here. I mean,
coming back to the status quo.
Exactly. I think the status quo is going to endure here as long as we let it endure, in other words.
And I have another, we're getting to the inspirational part of the evening, if you can't tell, I guess. I have another video, and then I'm going to come to you, Dr. July.
A man came up to me once and asked, what can one person do?
What can one young person do?
What can one person your age do?
What can one young person do?
Young people I've helped have provided over 1,300 jobs.
I'm providing food and education for 35 children.
I've united 30 youth organisations in Australia to come together to combat climate change.
I've helped 120 students build sustainable services in their communities. So far.
So far.
What can one person do?
I've taught students to combat climate change in more than 200 schools.
I've helped 45 sex workers.
I created a health volunteering organization that provides health services to needy people in 12 different countries. This is what I've done so far.
So far.
So far. So far.
So far.
That's what I have done so far.
But Dr. Bullard, something when we had talked, you had said that gives you optimism is youth, and youth taking action. So I'm wondering, what can one person do, in your opinion? Marita, would you mind?
Well, I think every social movement that has been successful in this country and probably around the world have always had a very strong youth and student component. And climate is no different. And so I think understanding that one person can make a difference, and when that one person links up with another person, and a collective, you get a collective movement. And I think I came out of the '60s in the civil rights movement, and so activism combined with commitment, combined with longevity, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so, what we try to do at our university at Texas Southern is that we are working with historically black colleges and universities and students in the Gulf Coast, from Texas all the way across to Florida and the South Atlantic states, all the way up to Maryland, and where 90% of the black colleges are located. And so we are working with the students in these schools and the communities where these universities are located. And in many cases, they are on the front line. They're on the coast, and so that the students own the issues, and they work in partnership with impacted communities. So I think that's how we build partnerships, we build coalitions, and we build credibility. And I think when you get young people involved and working in those communities, they can see that it's more than getting a grade. They're getting the satisfaction that they're doing something that's very important. And it's great to do study abroad, but it's also great to go 3 blocks from your school and do something that's important.
Working on solutions is a good way to go forward, and in a proactive way. So coming back to Germany, for instance, some people started with renewable energies. Now more than 370,000 people work in that sector. More than 1.5 million people work in the environmental sector somewhere, and these are quite good jobs. So if you compare them to the mining jobs, I think they're at least the same level. So that is a very proactive way, and I'm a big fan of having fun with solutions as well. So a lot of people, enjoying their new way of life or producing energy, and that gives me a very optimistic view.
Marina, you have something to add?
I was just going to say that I think in talking about youth and being sort of part of the catalyst to different movements, I think what makes that the case, and Deborah had mentioned critical thinking. I think that's, if we have to boil things down to maybe what the individual could do, I think is making sure that that your critical thinking skills are on fire like they are when you're a student. And I think that that's why students, they have that energy, that eagerness, and zest for life, because they're learning so many new things. And I think that we sort of get set in our ways as we get older, and we don't have that much zeal. I think if we continue to educate ourselves, especially as the world around us changes, then I think that things, as our networks expand, that'll be beneficial.
I see a lot of zeal and catalysts out here in this audience.
I just want to add to, I mean, I think when we talk about what one person can do, I love that you mentioned like the artist or the creative part, like all of us have a certain creativity that we bring to this, whether it be writing a song or a poem that's something more, public and visual, or whether it be having a blog where you talk about, something specific that you're doing to change something in your own home. I think that, we live in now a society that's so media-based and so global, and so, not just the individual anymore. And you have so much of a chance to impact on a really grand scheme with something as simple as like a tweet, right? And so I think that even starting the conversation is the big thing that we can do. The more we begin to talk about it, the more we see that it's a problem, the more we look for the solution, the more we begin to address it over and over again and really make progress with it. And I think it takes the person saying, hey, this is a problem that I noticed, what do you think about it? Even that small spark is huge in the overall picture.
Yeah, asking questions. We don't always have to have the answers to too. So here's you guys ready for the tearjerker? See if it works on you? Close on this note. This is actually another ad from a company. We've taken the company out, but you can guess.
Okay, so clear the background. If you would like to take the seat here. Come in, Mark.
The joy of having a new child, and on the other side, all the worries and the fears.
You realize that you're someone else's protector.
We are scared. We are scared seeing the present. We are scared for the future.
I do worry for the baby now, as the future, what's going to hold for them.
Maybe there's something you should know about the world in which your child will live. Something real. Something that's already happening. Every day, more and more food is being grown with a revolutionary method. Care. And new technologies will make clean drinking water available to hundreds of millions. So this will probably be the famous water war they speak so much about. And illnesses that today affect millions of children a year will be prevented by simple, everyday products. Your child could have more possibilities of having a healthier heart than any living person today. And the same chance of a broken heart. No one can escape that. But we have no doubt about one thing. They'll always have a tree in which to hide and cry. And by the time they find the right person, our children will have better chances of meeting their great-grandchildren than we ever did. Breathe calmly. Bring your child into this world. There has never been a better time to to create a brighter future for everyone on the planet. For those yet to come.
Sometimes people use the environment and the world as an excuse for them to say, okay, yeah, it's no good place to bring up a child.
Where I come from, you don't get to see clean water like that.
The world needs more good guys, and I like to think our baby will be one of the good guys.
But we have to change for them first.
We might not see it,
We
but
won't
maybe
see it,
our
but
great-grandchildren
will see
or
it.
great-great-grandchildren.
We're the characters in this story. How the story pans out is based on how we behave in this story. So, yeah, it's up to us to make a change, absolutely.
Any tears? So, my final question for all of you is, that video brings up a lot of things that we may or may not agree with, but what does success look like when we're talking about this? What does it look like? Don't everyone fight at once, start.
Well, I think, as someone who works in energy and we have so many of these issues, it becomes kind of sometimes intangible goals, and it's kind of frustrating. So I think sometimes when I'm trying to sort of plan projects out, I kind of have to reverse engineer, like, what do I actually want to achieve? And our big focus at Environmental Defense Fund is on climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So, while there's so many things that can answer that question, I think I'm focused kind of narrowly on, okay, what can we do that's going to reduce emissions at this point, at this point, at this point. I know, again, that's narrow, but that's where I'm starting.
Okay. Dr. Bullard, you're closest to the mic.
Well, I think expanding outward for me and for a lot of the communities that we work with, it's greenhouse gases and the other co-pollutants and that we know create health problems and create lots of problems associated with living nearby. I think it's not just a power plant and it's not just a chemical plant, it's also having access to transit, and that's clean and efficient and affordable, and having communities that's livable and that have access to parks and green space and access to healthy foods and access to health care and all those things, and access to a livable wage, not a minimum wage, a livable wage, and all those things that moving forward as it relates to creating a more sustainable, a more livable, a healthier, and fairer society. All that to me rolled up into we call climate justice, and it expands outward. It's more than greenhouse gases, and it's all those things in addition to the pollution or the greenhouse gases.
I'll answer as the one that has a little child back there, right? I guess the mom side of me that says, success looks like my child not having to be on medication as the norm, right? Like, I think our society is coming away of coping instead of preventing things, right? It's her being able to go to the beach and not wonder what's in the water, right? It's those very simple things that we probably take for granted on the everyday basis, It's her being able to breathe without an asthma inhaler, right? It's her not having to go to her doctor and report a list of genetic things that are going to affect her and her children because those things are no longer a harm for her, And I think that, there's a famous quote, they don't know who said it because they attribute it to a million different people, right? That success is like the smile of a child or a fresh garden, right? The success is knowing that you've changed one person's life. There's a long list of things that we probably would never use as a definition for success, but it's the idea that tomorrow when we wake up, the world is better than it was the day before, you know, and I think when we get into measuring success, it can't just be long-term goals, and it can't just be tomorrow goals, you know, but it has to be a variation of goals that are very tangible right now so that we stay with it and we continue on that trajectory. And it has to be those long-term things that can be measured, that we can say, yeah, we've made an impact and we've changed something from the problems that we saw.
I guess I would say, I think, just in a nutshell, a more equitable distribution of resources and opportunities across the world. It's, as we've all been saying, the sort of energy transition and climate change are much bigger than just the energy transition and climate change. They really are civilizational changes. It's about our species understanding that it's the only species on the history of this planet to have altered the ecosystem of all the other species. And that's a historical responsibility, and with that comes an accountability. And it's, you know, it's come to us in our time to try to take care of that and try to do the best we can. And I think future generations will still be working on this problem because it's not going to be solved at once. But I think that's the moment. Those are the stakes that we're looking at. And so I think success can mean a great deal. Failure would also mean a great deal. And so I certainly hope that, you know, that in this sense that sort of we're able to find our way forward.
Okay, well, actually a few hours before, I had my first Skype chat with my granddaughter, actually, which is just a few days, a few weeks old. And for me, success would be if she's my age, then, and I'm quite optimistic that will happen. So she will live in an economy which you know, is much more sustainable than we are living today. And we're working on, you know, different sectors and bringing more sustainability to these sectors. As you mentioned before, this is the whole spectrum of things we have to consider, not only the emissions, but also the economy and a fair distribution of all goods. And I think it's possible.
Great. So I want to thank all of you for being here. You guys don't know this yet, but they entered into this conversation not knowing what we were going to ask them. So coming back to our talk of starting a conversation, I want to thank you for being willing and trusting to take that risk. And for all of you to come to an event from a group that you didn't know, and to join this conversation. And I'd love to challenge all of us to continue these conversations, again, outside of this room and inside of this room, and to also move beyond conversation, because conversation is wonderful, but action is also important. So to figure out how we can play, you know, find our role and our community. And would love to just end on this last quote, because it's one that I think is really apropos to a lot of what we talked about, and to just think about, is that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So another challenge to think bigger, think creatively, bring in that creativity, and talk to people that maybe come from a different perspective than we do, because we might learn something. So thank you guys so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Very inspired by all of you. Thank you.